Vanessa didn't know that day would be her last as the woman she used to be. She had 3 missed calls, a lukewarm latte in her cup holder, and a lipstick stain on her phone screen. Her mind was already halfway into the boardroom, planning how to pivot the fourth quarter losses into a win. She was the kind of woman who never slowed down, never allowed herself to. But fate doesn't care about schedules or spreadsheets. She remembers the color of the sky that morning, bright, a little too cheerful. The kind of blue that makes you believe nothing bad could possibly happen. The kind of lie only daylight can tell. And then, a red light, a distracted driver, a moment too late. There wasn't even time for fear, just a split second of realization as the other car came barreling through the intersection. It hit the driver's side at full speed. Vanessa's car spun, metal against metal, glass shattering like ice. Then came the silence. Not the silence of peace, the silence of nothingness. Not even pain, just absence. Her body ceased to be hers, her voice gone, her eyelids heavy stone. She wasn't dead, but she wasn't alive in the way that counted either. She was trapped, suspended in her own body like a ghost with no exit. People say comas are like sleep, but that's a fantasy for those who've never been inside one. Vanessa floated in that in-between place, a prison without bars, no dreams, no rest, just a slow, endless fall into herself. And yet, she was there. She heard the monitors, the nurses, her mother's voice, soft, trembling. She heard it all. And someone else was coming, someone who would change everything, with a whisper she was never meant to hear. It was the 3rd day. Vanessa had been floating in silence, drowning in thoughts she couldn't speak. The world around her moved like shadows behind a frosted window, there, but unreachable. And then he came, Brandon. She knew it was him the second she smelled that cologne, the one he always wore to important meetings. Expensive, sharp, and calculated, just like him. He greeted the nurse with a practiced smile, nodded at the doctor, and walked in like a grieving husband who still believed. But Vanessa didn't need her eyes to see through him. She felt it, the stiffness in his touch, the pause in his breath. He sat beside her bed, leaned in slowly, and whispered, "How much longer are you going to keep costing everyone? Vanessa, you should have just died." Time stopped. Her soul recoiled. Her mind screamed. But her body stayed frozen, a prisoner to betrayal in its most intimate form. He said it so casually, so coldly, like he was commenting on a bad investment. This wasn't sorrow. This was calculation. She realized in that moment he didn't think she'd ever hear him. And worse, he didn't care. Vanessa couldn't move. She couldn't blink, breathe on her own, or lift a finger. But she could feel everything. The sheets beneath her back, the cool air brushing against her skin, the weight of Brandon's breath on her face. And worst of all, she could hear every word, every sigh, every insult. "You should have just died. This isn't love. This is debt." That wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't a hallucination brought on by trauma. It was real. She lay there trapped in a body that betrayed her, forced to listen to the man she loved reveal a truth sharper than any scalpel. He didn't care if she lived. He just cared that she hadn't died fast enough. There is a special kind of pain that comes not from injury, but from awakening. The kind that rips through your soul when you realize someone once meant everything to you, but you mean nothing to them. Vanessa had faced the edge of death, but this was worse. Because now, she had to survive with the knowledge of who he truly was. To the world, Brandon was the perfect husband. He brought white roses every Thursday, always fresh, always pristine. He smiled softly when nurses offered sympathy. He stood by Vanessa's bed with just the right amount of sorrow in his eyes, as if he rehearsed it in front of the mirror. He said all the right things. He looked like devotion. She's strong. She's a fighter. I believe in her. People whispered in the hallway, "He hasn't missed a single day. What a good man." But they didn't hear what Vanessa heard when the door clicked shut, when the nurses left, when the mask slipped. That's when his voice changed. Gone was the grieving husband. In his place, cold steel, sharp disgust. "You're bleeding money while you lie here like a vegetable. You didn't even leave me passwords, no exit strategy." Typical. It was like watching a stage play, but knowing the backstage secret. The lead actor doesn't care about the story. He just cares about the applause. Vanessa realized she wasn't his partner. She was his prop. And now that the spotlight had shifted, he was ready to walk off stage. He didn't whisper anymore. Brandon didn't even bother pretending to be gentle. His voice, once so polished in public, now dripped with resentment behind closed doors. He leaned over her bed, checking to make sure no one was outside. Then he spoke clear, venomous. "Where are the company accounts, Vanessa? Do you have any idea what it costs to keep you breathing? I'm drowning in debt because of you." Each word slammed into her like a fist. This wasn't grief. It was frustration. Not love, but blame. He wasn't visiting her out of loyalty. He was waiting like a vulture, perched by a barely beating heart, circling for the right moment to cash in. "You didn't even leave me passwords. No instructions, no access, not even a damn PIN code." He exhaled sharply. His sigh wasn't sad, it was irritated. And Vanessa realized something horrifying. He wasn't mourning her, he was resenting her. All she had built, the company, the empire, the image, he wanted it, and she was in the way. Even while unconscious, she was in his way. And to Brandon, that made her unforgivable. Vanessa could feel him. Even though she couldn't move her skin, still remembered. The weight of his palm on her wrist, the press of his lips against her forehead, the way his fingers brushed her hair back slowly, deliberately when nurses were in the room. But it was all fake. There was no warmth in his touch, no tenderness in his voice, no heartbeat that synced with hers. She felt it in her bones, the lie. It wasn't a husband reaching for his wife. It was a man performing grief for an audience. He squeezed her hand not because he missed her, but because someone walked in, and that's what made it crueler than words. He touched her like she was already gone. Vanessa wanted to pull away, to shiver, to scream, but her body betrayed her. All she could do was feel the icy pretense settle on her skin, feel the weight of betrayal sink deep into her chest like an anchor. This wasn't a stranger violating her trust. This was the man who once swore, "I'll love you in sickness and in health." And now he touched her like she was an obligation, like love was a job he was tired of pretending to do. It began with footsteps, small, soft, barely audible over the machines and the night shift chatter outside her room. Vanessa had learned to recognize sounds, the heavy shoes of the nurses, the sharp clicks of Brandon's dress shoes. But this was different. It was the tip-tap of someone light, someone small, like the sound of innocence sneaking past sorrow. And then a voice. "Hi, I'm Maya. You looked lonely, so I thought I'd keep you company." It wasn't a nurse, not a visitor, just a child standing by Vanessa's bed, holding a worn-out stuffed bear and talking like they were old friends. Vanessa, still locked in silence, felt a strange warmth stir inside her. Maya didn't speak like an adult. She didn't ask when Vanessa would wake up. She didn't cry. She believed. "They say you're sleeping, but I think you're just waiting. Maybe you're waiting for someone to talk to you. Maybe I can be that someone." Vanessa couldn't see her, but she could feel her, like a tiny spark reaching into a frozen soul. This wasn't medical. It wasn't logical. It was something else, entirely. Hope. The next night she returned, Vanessa felt the shift in the room before she even heard the footsteps. There was something about Maya's presence. It didn't just enter the room, it softened it. This time, Maya carried something in her arms, a little stuffed bear, worn from love, with one ear slightly flopped over and stitches showing along the seam. She climbed onto the chair beside Vanessa's bed and leaned in. "This is Teddy. He helps me when I'm scared." Vanessa couldn't respond, but inside, something in her stirred, an ache and a flicker of warmth. Then Maya gently placed the bear next to Vanessa's arm, letting it rest against her blanket like it belonged there. "I think you're not really gone," she whispered. "I think you're just waiting for the right person to talk to you." Silence. Then, as if to seal that promise, Maya leaned her head on the edge of the bed and held Vanessa's wrist like it was the most natural thing in the world. No monitors beeped louder, no doctor intervened. But for the first time in weeks, Vanessa didn't feel alone. That bear wasn't just a toy, it was an offering, a bridge, a whisper of belief when the rest of the world had stopped believing. Vanessa had never felt more invisible than she did in that hospital bed. To the world, she was a patient. To Brandon, she was a burden. To most, a body kept alive by wires and whispers of hope. But Maya didn't see a corpse with a heartbeat. She didn't see a lost cause. She saw Vanessa. She spoke to her, not around her. She told stories, shared her pudding, hummed lullabies. She didn't ask for anything in return, not movement, not speech, not a miracle. She simply stayed, night after night. No one else had done that. Not the nurses with their tight schedules, not the visitors who came with awkward silence and flowers they didn't really mean, not even Brandon, whose affection ended the moment the room emptied. But Maya treated her like she still mattered, like she was still human. And that changed something deep inside Vanessa, because the worst part of being trapped in your body isn't the stillness, it's the loneliness, the feeling that you're screaming inside your mind and no one even knows you exist, until someone like Maya hears you anyway. And that, Vanessa realized, is sometimes the beginning of coming back. The bear wasn't just a toy. Vanessa didn't know it yet, but that little tattered stuffed bear, the one with the crooked ear and the threadbare paws, carried more than comfort. It carried proof. One night, after telling Vanessa about her favorite nurse and a boy on the pediatric floor who always stole extra pudding, Maya paused. Then she said it almost like a confession. "Dr. Blake gave me something. Inside Teddy. It's a voice recorder. He said it might help me feel better if I ever wanted to talk when I'm scared." Vanessa's pulse, what little of it she could feel, surged. Maya didn't know what that bear had captured. She just thought it was helping her feel less alone. But Vanessa knew. She remembered the day Brandon came in late, his breath sour with whiskey. No flowers, no charm, just rage. This isn't love. This is debt. She should have died. I'm wasting my life in this room. Those words, that moment. It had all been said right next to the bear, and the bear had heard it all. Maya, still unaware of the gravity of her own secret, clutched Teddy to her chest and whispered, "Sometimes I think he's not a nice man." Vanessa wanted to scream, "You're right, he's dangerous. Please tell someone." But all she could do was hope that somehow, someone would finally hear what the bear already knew. The room went still. Dr. Blake stood by the monitor. Vanessa's mother gripped the arm of her chair. Her father stopped breathing mid-sentence. Even the machines seemed to fall quiet. And then, click, the recording began. At first, just static, a low hum, the faint sound of shuffling. Then Brandon's voice, sharp and unmistakable. "You think I want to live like this? Chained to a hospital bed, wasting money on someone who's already gone? If she would just die, this would all be easier." The words sliced through the silence like a scalpel. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Vanessa couldn't open her eyes, but she could feel the shift in the air, like oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Her mother gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Her father swore under his breath, a sound Vanessa had rarely heard. And Dr. Blake said nothing, but the way his jaw clenched told her everything. That recording wasn't just sound, it was truth made real, undeniable, unforgivable. The world had been sympathizing with a man who was silently hoping his wife would die. Now they knew, and Brandon's mask was gone. She stood in the corner, gripping Teddy like it was armor. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with focus. She was only a child, but in that moment, she was the strongest one in the room. The doctors sat gently beside her. Vanessa's parents leaned forward, hands trembling, and Maya, voice soft but steady, began to speak. "I was under the bed," she said. "I heard him say she should die, that she was a burden. He was mad. His voice was mean. He sounded like he hated her." No theatrics, no exaggeration, just truth. Unfiltered, undiluted, and unforgettable. They asked her to repeat it, not to pressure her, but to be sure. And Maya didn't flinch. He said she should have left him the passwords. He said she made everything harder. The room held its breath again. A child had done what no adult dared, tell the whole truth. Not out of revenge, not for attention, but because it was right. Maya didn't need a courtroom. She didn't need a script. She just needed her voice and the courage to use it. The call came early in the morning. Brandon was told there had been a sudden change in Vanessa's condition, something urgent, something serious. He arrived at the hospital an hour later, irritated, disheveled, clearly hungover. No flowers. No polished smile. Just annoyance. "What now?" he muttered to the receptionist. "Is she finally dead?" But what waited for him wasn't bad news. It was justice. Inside room 304, Dr. Blake stood at the foot of the bed. Vanessa's parents sat stiffly in the corner, and beside them, half hidden behind a chair, Maya, clutching her bear. And flanking the room, 2 uniformed police officers. Brandon froze. "What is this?" he asked, laughter twitching nervously in his voice. "Doctor?" Blake didn't smile. "You said some things, Brandon. Things no man should ever say to someone he claims to love." Brandon scoffed. "You think you can arrest me over some venting? She's in a coma?" And then Dr. Blake pressed play. Brandon's voice, cold, cruel, undeniable, filled the room. "She should have died. This would all be easier." The officers stepped forward. "Mr. Hartley, you're under investigation for attempted coercion of end-of-life decision-making. You'll need to come with us." For once, Brandon had nothing to say, and as they turned him toward the door, Maya's small voice cut through the tension. "I told you someone would hear you." The room was silent as Brandon's voice echoed once more from the tiny speaker inside Teddy. If she would just die, this would all be easier. The sentence hung in the air like a fog, toxic, undeniable. Brandon blinked. Then he laughed. "You've got to be kidding me. That was just venting." "Come on. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're stressed." He looked around for agreement, a nod, a smirk, anything, but no one moved. Vanessa's mother stared at him, eyes wet with betrayal. Dr. Blake stood still, arms crossed. And Maya didn't look away. She clutched the bear tighter, like it had just spoken for her. Brandon tried again. "It was private. I didn't mean it. I was just frustrated." But the recording kept playing, his voice getting sharper, uglier. "She didn't leave passwords. She didn't leave a plan. Just a mess for me to clean up." That wasn't frustration. That was entitlement, cruelty. The bear had become more than a toy. It was a witness, a weapon. a truth no one could spin or bury. And the more Brandon spoke, the more guilty he sounded. The click of handcuffs was louder than any scream. Brandon flinched as the cold steel wrapped around his wrists. For the first time, his face showed something real. Not charm. Not fake sorrow, but fear. You can't be serious. You're arresting me over a recording from a child's toy? No one responded. The officers stayed silent as they turned him toward the hallway. Dr. Blake watched with steady eyes. Maya stood still, Teddy in her arms, her tiny body straighter than ever before. And Vanessa, she still couldn't move. Not yet. But inside, she roared. It wasn't loud, it wasn't visible, but it was there. A fire lighting deep in her chest, burning through the paralysis, screaming, "I'm still here, and I remember everything." Brandon looked back one last time, expecting weakness, expecting silence. He saw nothing, but Vanessa didn't need her eyes to speak, not anymore. Her silence had become her strength, her stillness, her armor, and for the first time, Brandon realized she wasn't the one who was powerless. He was. It was so small, so subtle, that the nurses almost missed it. Her right index finger, it moved. Not much, just the slightest twitch, like a whisper against the blanket. But to Vanessa, it felt like an earthquake, like cracking open a cage from the inside. And then her eyelids fluttered, once, then again. Light poured in, blurry, too bright, but real. The room was still the same. The hospital bed, the steady beep of machines, the faint scent of antiseptic. And then a silhouette, small, still, holding a bear. Maya. Vanessa blinked, tears welled, and then she smiled, not with strength, not with victory, but with the quiet relief of being seen, really, truly seen, by the one soul who never stopped believing. Maya stepped closer, eyes wide. "You're awake, aren't you?" Vanessa didn't speak. She couldn't, not yet. But her eyes said yes. Her smile said thank you. Her heart said, "You saved me." The machines beeped steadily. Nurses whispered from the hallway. Sunlight streamed through the window like a quiet promise. Vanessa opened her mouth. At first, nothing came, just air, dry, trembling. But Maya was there, watching her, holding Teddy against her chest, eyes wide with that unshakable hope. Vanessa tried again. Her voice cracked, barely more than a breath. "You saved me." Maya froze. Her hands trembled. Then she dropped the bear, climbed onto the bed, and wrapped her arms around Vanessa's shoulders so gently as if hugging a miracle. She didn't need to say anything. She didn't need to cry. Vanessa's whisper had been enough. A whisper louder than any scream. Two souls, one broken, one brave, had finally found each other again. In that tiny hospital room, love didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived in a whisper, and in arms that refused to let go. The woman who once walked through boardrooms in heels sharp enough to command attention was gone. The titles, the accolades, the calendar booked months ahead, none of it mattered now. Vanessa had come back, but she didn't return as the CEO, not as the boss, not as the symbol of success. She came back as something far more powerful, a mother. She no longer dreamed of mergers or market shares. She dreamed of school lunches and bedtime stories, of warm pancakes on Sunday mornings, of protecting Maya from the kind of cold this world so casually offers. She didn't just want to live. She wanted to live right, to choose kindness, to build trust, to love without condition. Vanessa had once fought for her place at the top. Now she fought for a place at the breakfast table next to Maya, where her heart truly belonged. The courtroom was quiet. Not tense, not dramatic, just quiet, like a room that already knew the answer. Vanessa sat in her wheelchair, her posture fragile but her gaze firm. Maya sat beside her, holding her hand, dressed in her best little yellow dress. The judge flipped through the file, paused, looked over the top of his glasses. All documentation checks out. Miss Vanessa Carter, do you understand the responsibility of adopting this child? Vanessa didn't hesitate. Yes, I've never been more certain of anything. He nodded. Then, with a soft but final tone, then from this day forward, Maya Thompson shall legally be known as Maya Carter. No gasps, no objections, just a quiet, overwhelming wave of something sacred, belonging. Maya looked up at Vanessa. Vanessa squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're mine, always." He never brought roses. He brought time. He didn't try to fix her. He listened, to the pauses between her words, to the weight behind her silences. Dr. Chibadelia. Blake was never the loudest voice in the room, but he was always the most present. He had been there when others gave up, not because he believed in miracles, but because he believed in Vanessa, not as a patient, not as a symbol, but as a woman who had endured hell and still chose to speak with kindness. There was no grand confession, no fireworks. Just one night on the porch under the stars when Vanessa whispered, "Why are you still here?" And Blake answered without hesitation, "Because you never left. You were always here, and I saw you." That was all she needed. Not someone to rescue her, but someone to see her. And that was love. The kitchen smelled of pancakes and fresh coffee. Laughter echoed softly through the little house. Tiny feet pattered across the wooden floor. And on the shelf, Teddy sat quietly, a silent witness to everything. It wasn't a grand estate, no glittering chandeliers, no roaring crowds, just a home, filled with love, filled with second chances. Maya leaned close to Vanessa, her voice a whisper. "We got a second chance." Vanessa smiled, eyes glistening, and this time I'm not letting go. The noise wasn't chaos, it was life, beautiful, imperfect, and wholly theirs. In the quiet, they found happiness, not loud, not flashy, just real. Life doesn't always go as planned, and sometimes the people we trust the most can disappoint us. But true strength isn't just about surviving the storm. It's about finding hope in the darkest moments, holding on to the small acts of kindness, and believing in the power of second chances. This story reminds us that love is not about grand gestures, but quiet presence. Family isn't always defined by blood, but by who stays when it matters most. Even when your body feels trapped, your spirit can still roar. No matter how deep the betrayal or how long the struggle, healing starts the moment someone truly sees you and chooses to stay. If Vanessa's journey touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join us at Athena Stories for more powerful, inspiring tales of courage, love, and hope. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might change your life. Share your thoughts below. What part of Vanessa's story resonated most with you? Your voice matters. Together, let's build a community that uplifts, supports, and reminds each other you are never alone.